I think I'm just going to say, I'm going to introduce a couple of things in relation to Deiric. And then those that do come in, they can hear the master himself instead of those people waiting to listen to me. So just as a bit of an introduction, I've known Deiric for quite a while now. I've known Deiric since 2003. And as I've said before, if I look at Deiric, Deiric's the kind of individual that I'm very comfortable going to war with. He's the kind of guy that's got your back. He's a very good friend of mine. And if I look at Deiric, 2003, we met. So I've known him for the last 14 years. And he's a very well-recognized author. He's written 4 books. His big thing, though, is, and the books, please don't get me wrong, the books are really, really good. But the big thing is his natural charisma, his natural enthusiasm, which you're going to hear, no doubt. And you're going to hear it with this Irish accent to boot. So if you don't want to hear too much Irish, you can turn the sound down. But Deiric's a really, really great guy. He in fact, he tends to focus on the leadership side of things, and thus the interest in emotional intelligence, which he's had for a long time. When I first met him, he was the National Director of Ireland for Profiles International. He then became, probably very shortly thereafter, he was responsible for the growth of Profiles International worldwide, and thereafter got involved with Genos, and now is firmly in the Genos stable and ready to bolt, I suppose, from a growth perspective, an emotional intelligence perspective. It's got its origins in Australia, although Deiric will give you some more information with regard to that. He loves to speak, as you'll hear, and he speaks sense 99% of the time, except for when he every now and again has a little cockroach which falls off his mind. All right, sorry, Deiric, that's the South African joke. It's got nothing to do with Ireland. But I think what we'll do is, Deiric, I'm going to hand some time over to you right now. We're on the spot going on for 12 o'clock. So anyone that should be joining us should have joined us. As I said, we've got around about 5 or 6 people that indicated that they were going to. But hopefully they'll just tag along as we go. So as the cliche says, without any further ado, I hand it over to Deiric McCann.
Great, thank you, Mark, and thanks as ever for such a positive introduction that puts absolutely no pressure on Deiric. You're going to hear his natural enthusiasm, his energy, and so on. So you're really putting it up to me. Thank you. Listen, folks, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here this morning. I won't spend an awful lot of time talking about who I am. Rather, prefer to dive into the material. What we're going to talk about today, very specifically, is emotional intelligence and the impact it has upon businesses' bottom line, the extent to which your bottom line is directly impacted by the way that you show up and the way that you deal with people, which is what we describe as emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence just being, if you like, the more modern version of interpersonal relationships or good communication, the more modern term for that. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're really just talking about having third-party sensitivity, caring about the folks that we work with, and how we show up and how we appear to them. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the impact it has on the bottom line in our organizations, and we're going to talk about how anybody, from leaders down to the troops, can become more emotionally intelligent to get better results for themselves and better results for their organizations. Now, I think one of the challenges with emotional intelligence is sometimes putting a definition on it. And what I'm going to start with today is, rather than defining it in informal terms, I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you an experience whereby I take you back to a time when you have been impacted by both strongly emotional intelligent people and people with very poor emotional intelligence. And I want you to re-experience what it was like to work with those people so that you understand what's at stake when we talk about raising the emotional intelligence of the people in your organization. So Mark may well have sent you through a copy of this form. If he hasn't, don't worry, but please get a pen and a paper and a piece of paper in front of you, because we're going to go through a very practical exercise now for a moment or two. And as I say, to give you a sense of what emotional intelligence really is and how you've already experienced it. So if you happen to have this form, well then I want you to think of the best manager or boss that you've ever worked for. So on the sheet there, I say the best person I've ever worked with, for, or around. In an ideal situation, this exercise, I'd really like you to think of the best boss you worked for. And only if you didn't have a boss who impressed you or motivated you or enthused you in that situation, then think of the best colleague that you ever worked with. So as you're thinking of that person, let me tell you what we're going to do. In a few moments, I'm going to put up 5 or 6 behaviors. I'm going to put up 5 or 6 behaviors on the screen and ask you to rate the frequency with which this great boss demonstrated those behaviors. And if this person demonstrated those behaviors significantly more than others, I'm going to ask you, as you can see on the screen, to give them a score of 5 for the behavior. If they demonstrated that behavior significantly less than others, I'm going to ask you to give them a 1. If they were about the same as anybody else, it'll be a 3, and you can see the scale runs from 1 to 5. So if somebody demonstrates one of the behaviors a hell of a lot, well then it's going to be a 5. If they don't demonstrate at all, it's going to be a 1. And we're going to go through 6 behaviors. I'm going to ask you to score each of them between 1 and 5. So let's think of that great boss, ideally. And if you don't have a great boss, comes to mind a coworker, a mentor, a coach, teacher, etc. And just put their initials or a name on the top of the sheet, just so when you look at this afterwards that you don't wonder, what was I doing with this thing? Now, as I say, I'm going to put up 6 statements, and I'm going to ask you to rate them. So let's start with 1 and spend a little bit of time on it. Demonstrates awareness of their mood and emotions. So if this person demonstrated a good awareness of their mood and emotions and how it impacted the way that they behaved and the things that they said, well then you'd score them a 5. If they were more inclined to demonstrate that awareness than other people, you'd score them a 5. If they were less inclined than most other people and significantly less, you'd score them a 1. And if they were about the same as everybody, you'd score them a 3. Let me give you one example just to get us going. I was in a meeting a few weeks ago, and a colleague of mine, at a really heated point in the meeting, kind of strangely for me, got up and left the room. And the timing was extraordinary. You just wonder what just happened. Where did she go? And when I spoke to her, she came back in after 2 or 3 minutes. And when the meeting was over, and I spoke to her and I asked her what was going on, she said, you know, Deiric, I just didn't trust myself with some of the things that were being said to be able to keep myself under control. She showed a great awareness of her mood and emotions and how that might impact what she'd say or how she'd behave. And so she chose to absent herself. She just went out for a minute, took a few breaths, came back in and carried on. So thinking of that great boss, to what extent did that person demonstrate that awareness of their mood and emotions? Give them a 5 if it was very much a defining feature of who they were, and 1 if not. So give them a score now. So you get the idea. We're now going to go through 5 more of these statements, and I'm going to ask you to rate them from 5 down to 1. To what extent did this person make other people feel appreciated? If they did it so well, so often, it's a 5. If they never did it at all, it's a 1. And if it's somewhere in between, give them a score somewhere in between. And another behavior. To what extent was this person open and honest about mistakes? As you know from your experience, as we all know from our experience, it's not always easy to confess that, hey, mea culpa, it was me that screwed up, it was me that dropped the ball. To what extent was this person open and honest about their mistakes? 5 high, 1 low, 3 medium. So give them a score between 1 and 5. To what extent did this person make ethical decisions? Again, it's very, very easy to make an ethical decision and do the right thing when there's not much personal at stake. But when things get tough and you have to make a decision which is ethical, that's going to not necessarily be in your best interest, well then that's what we're trying to measure. 5, they always made ethical decisions. 1, they never made them. So give them that score now. 5, they managed their emotions effectively in difficult situations. I gave you the example with the first behavior there of my colleague who absented themselves from the room. The first thing that she had to be was aware that she was getting heated and that emotions were going to affect the way she behaved. And then she managed her emotions very effectively in that situation. She got up and she walked out of the room. And that was really good management of their emotions. If this person that you're thinking of was somebody who, for example, when they got angry, it was like a firework. You light the blue touch paper, you say something to them that they don't like and they take off like a firework, well then they're a 1. If they tended to show much more constraint and were able to manage their emotions when they got too high, too low, too sad, too happy in difficult situations, well then they would be a 5. So give them a score between 1 and 5. And then finally, recognizes others' hard work and achievements. And I don't think I have to explain this too much, but 5 is they did it much more than I have ever seen anybody else do it. 1, they never did it at all. So what you've done now, and by the way, welcome to the person who just joined us there. You're very, very welcome. What we've just done is we've looked at a great boss from our own personal experience. We're looking at 6 behaviors and we're giving them a score from 5 down to 1 according to how they demonstrate that behavior. So what we've got now are 6 scores running between 1 and 5. Please add those scores up and you'll get a total of between 5 and 30. And once you've got that done, let's move on to the next part. Here is one of the things that I don't really have to tell you, but I'm going to tell you. We absolutely impact everybody that we encounter and we work with and we deal with day in, day out, according to the way that we choose to show up. So we have a direct impact on how the other people around us feel. Some people refer to this as emotional contagion, but whatever it is, you just know. Well, let me ask you the question. And I can't see a show. I can't see a show of hands on the machine. But if you were in the room with me, I'd ask for a show of hands. And I'd say, can you think of anybody, did you know that when they walk into the room, the energy and the positivity is sucked out of the room? My American colleagues would say they suck the oxygen out of the room. And I think everybody can think of somebody who brings that downing effect to things. And we can also think of people who raise the energy in a room. Well, what I want you to do is think of this great boss and think, how do they make you feel? When you were around them, what are the sort of bullet point words you would use to describe the way they made you feel? Was it happy? Was it sad? Was it upbeat, downbeat? Were you depressed? Were you ecstatic? Were you confident? Were you insecure? So put down 3 or 4 words, or as many as you like, but at least let's say 3 or 4 words that represent the way you felt around this person. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And by all means, continue to write. I'm going to now, as we do that, I'm going to turn over and turn things down to a little bit darker. We're going to go to the kind of opposite side, the dark side of this exercise. I've just had you look at the best boss you ever worked for. Now I want you to work, or I want you to think about the most difficult boss you ever worked for. Do me a favor. Ignore that word challenging that I have on the screen, because in some cultures challenging can be a very positive thing. When somebody challenges you to be your best or to bring your best efforts to things. What I'm looking for is that boss who is most difficult for you to work with. So get that person in mind, put their initials down on the sheet if you like, and again, we're going to do the same exercise. I'll read out the same 6 behaviors, and I just want you to rate them. 5, they demonstrated that behavior a lot. 1, they didn't demonstrate it at all. 3 in the middle, and you can rate them somewhere between 1 and 5. So let us start with, oh, I've gone too fast. Here we go. Demonstrated awareness of their mood and emotions. To what extent did this person demonstrate awareness of their mood and emotions? 5 is high, 1 is low. And I think you're probably getting the gist of this now, so we can move a little bit faster through this part. To what extent do they make others feel appreciated? Give them a score between 1 and 5. To what extent were they open and honest about mistakes? 5 is high, 1 is low, 3 is average. Give them a score between 1 and 5. To what extent do they make difficult, or I beg your pardon, make ethical decisions? Give them a score. To what extent did they manage their emotions effectively in difficult situations? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give them a score. And then finally, to what extent did they recognize others' hard work and achievements? 5, absolutely typical of them. 1, absolutely not typical of them. And once again, you have 5 scores. They're running somewhere between 1 and 5. Please add them up and just get a total. And now, same thing again. I want you to consider how this person made you feel. How did you feel being around this person? Put a few words down that describe the general impact that they had upon you. Did it make you happy, sad? Did it make you feel confident, undermined, upbeat, downbeat, whatever? Whatever comes to mind. And think back really to your experience with this individual person. What was it like to be around them? How did they make you feel? So I'm going to return to this in a few moments, and I'm going to talk to you about the exercise we've just done and what you were measuring. But before I do that, I'm going to give you some idea of how that exercise came to be, where it came from, and the company that was responsible for generating it and the tools that sit behind it. I am responsible for the international development of Genos International, a company specializing in the development of emotional intelligence assessments and training solutions that was founded in 2002 in Sydney, Australia by a Dr. Ben Palmer. It has since, over those 15 years, grown to be Australia's leading emotional intelligence assessment solution provider with about 1,200 independent coach, consultant, and trainer partners in that country, which when you consider the population of Australia is about 22 million, it's a fairly sizable partner population. But besides independent coach, consultants, and trainer partners, we also have several thousand in-house coach, consultant, and trainer partners, people who work for the training or the organizational development or the HR departments of clients. And that client list is really quite a who's who of clients. I won't bore you with going through all of these and what a wonderful organization we are, but I will make the point that in common with most people, we show our most impressive household name clients up on the front screen like this. But I want to make a very important point. Because we're dealing with emotional intelligence, because we're dealing with how people show up and the impact they have on others and the impact that in turn has on the extent to which they are productive and happy in their work, this is relevant to organizations like the ones we're showing on the screen, the large organization, but it's also highly relevant and perhaps even more relevant to small organizations with 5 or 10 or 15 people in them. Because in that situation, it's probably even more important than that people relate well to one another. And these are the sort of organizations we've worked with in this. One of the things that makes us different to everybody else in the emotional intelligence assessment world is our platform was created intentionally to help clients get commercial results that are meaningful to them. And what I mean is really that anything we do should be measurable on the bottom line of a client. So the sorts of clients that we've worked are the sorts of results we've worked to get. With Coles, Kohl's is kind of like a Walmart, if I put it in a US context, but a very, very large retail chain. And we increased their employee engagement by 28% in a 12-month period. You increase employee engagement by 28% in any period, and you have a dramatic impact upon the bottom line of the organization. Engagement of people drives bottom line performance. With the Australia Post, we increased our leadership competency by a measurable 11%, again, over approximately a 12-month period. I'm going to show you this Sanofi Aventis case study in a couple of minutes. I'm going to show you this one because a lot of times when people think about the applications of emotional intelligence, they tend to focus on making people better leaders so that they get better results from people, and that's good. That's a great application. Or they focus upon helping people to communicate better so that in teams they can be more effective, and that's a great application. But what they often miss, and what organizations and coaches, consultants, and trainers often miss, is that the one part or the one profession where emotional intelligence is really, really impactful is the sales profession. The extent to which we are emotionally intelligent in the way we deal with our clients when we're selling them to them is the extent to which we're successful. So I'm going to show you how that played out in a real study in a major pharmaceutical organization that was peer-reviewed or published in a peer-reviewed journal. And then finally, I'm going to talk about something which is, this organization, Family and Community Services. We used this, our tools and our systems to prepare this organization for a very major change. There was going to be a major structural change. And as you know, people don't like change. It frightens them. It gets them scared. It gets them triggered. What we did was we used the training in emotional intelligence to raise their ability to more effectively communicate so that we effectively inoculated them against the negative effect of change, but we also increased their employee engagement at the same time. And you'll hear me say this a few times during this presentation. Anytime you raise engagement, you raise to a measurable extent the bottom line performance of an organization. So our organization was created, was formed specifically to develop a set of tools that could be used by commercial organizations to raise the emotional intelligence of their people in a way that would get them better, more measurable bottom line results. And as I say, that contrasts from everybody else in the emotional intelligence field because the majority of other tools came either from educational or research backgrounds, and then were kind of afterwards retrofitted to fit into a commercial environment. This is a great example of the impact that just the way you turn up, and we'll talk about what emotional intelligence is in a little bit more detail, but the way you turn up, the more emotionally intelligent you are as a sales guy, the better results you get. Sanofi Aventis is a very large pharmaceutical giant. We took several hundred of their salespeople who were doing largely the same job, selling pretty much the same products into the same sort of clients across different areas of several countries. We split the group in two. The control group got regular sales training, so the classic sort of sales training that salespeople get all the time. And in general, our experience is most salespeople have had as much sales training as they need to understand the whole concept of how to work with people and develop solutions and help and to sell to them. And frequently they get a little bit overtrained, but the knee-jerk reaction is when sales are down, let's retrain our people. What we did with half of them is we gave them that sort of conventional sales training. What we did with the other half was we trained them to be more emotionally intelligent. After several months, we measured the results of those two groups. And as you can see, the blue folks there dramatically by an average of about 15% outperformed the people who had got just a regular sales training. And that's because, as you'll see in a few moments, the way you turn up and the way you make people feel has such a dramatic impact upon people that if you're talking about a sales situation, which is a very tense situation for both the seller and the buyer, emotional intelligence is really, really important. So our focus was always from day one on creating a set of tools that were designed to get these sort of results. And the founder, Ben Palmer, started with two exercises. First, he went to the marketplace and he asked several hundred coaches, consultants, trainers, organizational development, human resource type people who had an understanding of assessments. What do you want in an ideal tool? Because on the front end, he wanted to have and to build from day one an assessment that was one that people felt they wanted to work with. Interestingly, we repeated this exercise, which was originally done about 13 or 14 years ago. We repeated it last year, and we got pretty much the same results. People, when they look at assessments, are looking all the time for largely the same things. So they said, we'd like it to be short, because we don't want people spending half a day doing an assessment. And we wanted to have high face validity. In other words, we wanted, on the face of it, to look credible. So we want it to look like it's capable of doing what it's doing, to be short. And here was a key word, this memorable word. We want it to be memorable so that our people start to use the terminology in the assessment to discuss development matters. We want it to be accessible and practical. We don't want technical terminology, and we want terminology that all of our people will understand. We obviously need it to be technically reliable and valid, to have been proven to do what it says it does. And this is really important. There is no way in a development environment that you should be measuring anything except the things that can be improved, that people can choose to change. So on day one, we had to create an assessment that measured demonstrable behaviors in an individual, so that if that individual didn't like the way they were showing up, didn't like the way other people saw them impact them, didn't like the way they made others feel, they had a choice. They could leave them the same, they could behave as they always had, or they could change that behavior. And that's really important, that we measure something that can actually be improved, because then we have the possibility of changing the results people get by changing the way they show up. It needed to include the ability to have free text or qualitative responses. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but it needs to take into account the individual's context. And by that I mean, some companies have different standards of the way they expect people to show up. Some organizations are very, very highly focused upon people being emotionally intelligent, others less so. The assessment needed to take account of that. Once we had the front end designed, and we designed it according to that input, we then had to design, if you want to call it an engine, we had to design the back end of the assessment that would actually produce the results. What Dr. Palmer did that was very, very clever, he took the 6 best established models of the time, and he did a factor analysis. If you like, a distillation by examining all of the items, all of the questions, all of the things that were measured by the existing well-established tools, and he came up with a distillation originally of 70 items that were the strongest, most predictive of the items in all of those other tools. So it was a little bit like, I think it was it Isaac Newton that said, if I see further than others, or if I see further than you, it's because I stand on the shoulders of others. What Dr. Palmer did was he stood on the research of other tools and established a model that was based on the best of the best. And the resulting tool was one that measured 70 specific emotionally intelligent behaviors. We've since had a dozen years to refine that and make it shorter and make it even stronger from a technical point of view. And we've managed, while maintaining the technical reliability and validity, to get it down to 42 items, which means it's much faster to take than it was on day one. We have 6 scales that I'm going to show you that have 7 items, 7 questions on each of those scales. And each of them, and this is important, measures a very obviously, clearly measurable, demonstrable workplace behavior, because we have a choice of our behaviors. If we don't like the way we behave, if we don't like the impact it has on others, we can change it. So it measures how often people demonstrate those emotional behaviors at work, and on a scale that runs from almost never or seldom, the one that you saw a few moments ago, 1 or 2, up to usually or almost always. So we're very much in the business not of measuring your potential to be emotionally intelligent, but measuring exactly how do you show up through the eyes of the people that you work for. How do you make them feel? So that's what it measures. And you've actually already used it. In fact, you used a very cut down version of our assessment when we started this presentation, because I'm going to show you that we use some of the items from that assessment to do that exercise we did at the beginning. Let's debrief it first. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to locate the chat box that's in the GoToMeeting console on the side of your screen. It may be, just check out, it can sometimes be hidden, but it'll be somewhere there. Use Alt and Tab to find that. And I'm going to ask you to give me some feedback via that chat box in a few moments. So I asked you first to generate a score for the great boss, and I asked you to add them up, and you should have ended up with a score that ran somewhere between 5 and 30. So do me a favor, please, and tell me now, what was the score you got for your great boss? Just plug that, please, into the chat box. So I got a 26. I got another 26. Keep them coming, folks. So just plug in whatever your total was for that great boss. 25, wonderful. Give me another one. 27, great. Give me one more and I'm a happy camper. 24. Thank you very much indeed, Chantal. So look, as you're looking at those scores, notice there's a trend starting to arise. And I do this exercise an awful lot with an awful lot of people worldwide. And what you find in general is the lowest score you'll ever see for that good boss is somewhere around 17, 18, but more typically it's above a 20. And what we had there was a 24, a 25, a 26, 26, 27. So just by observing that great boss's behavior, just by looking and remembering how did that person show up, how did they behave, you were able to give them a score, a number. And I just ask you at this stage just to notice that that number tended to be above 20, and in most cases in the sort of top 70 or top 80%, somewhere around 24, 25, 26, 27. Okay, so let's go to the dark side and let me ask you now, what was your score for the difficult difficult boss? So please key that score into the box. 11. Wow. Thank you, Ashley. 11 again. 8. Good Lord. Keep them coming. One or two more. Okay, well, I'm waiting for some more to come. There's a 16. Okay, there's a generous person given a 16. Now, as we're looking at this, again, I'm seeing the pattern I always tend to see. The first boss was somebody who you would describe as a great boss. You loved working for them. The second one, you found them difficult to work with. They had an impact upon you, which probably wasn't an ideal. And again, we tend to get scores typically that run from anywhere down to 2 or 3, all the way up to usually a maximum of about 15 or 16. But the point that I want you to see, and on the scores that I got there, I got an 8, an 11, 11, a 16, a 15. What I want you to see or notice is that there's a very distinct difference between the way those two people behaved, the way the great boss behaved and the way the difficult boss behaved. And you were able to not just see that and remember that difference, but you were also able to put a score upon them. You were able to separate them by a fairly dramatic margin. I mean, the highest score that I'm showing there for the great boss was a 26, and the lowest and the highest I'm showing for the difficult boss was a 16. The range from top to bottom was all the way from 8 up to 27. So it's a very dramatic ability to be able to separate those two sort of people simply on the way they behaved. But this is where it starts to become kind of interesting. Do me a favor and please start to pop up on the chat box some of the words that you wrote down when I asked you to write down how did this person make you feel. So please pop up on the chat box some of those words. I got happy, want to do more, want to do better. Calm, that is a fantastic word, thank you. Independent, capable, yeah. Nurtured, yeah. Appreciated and at ease, thank you. Okay, so I think we could agree that these are, well, actually, let me ask you, would you agree that these are kind of the words that you would hope that somebody would use to describe the impact that you have on people in a work or in a personal situation, that they made you feel happy, that wanted to do more, wanted to be better, calm, independent, capable, nurtured, appreciated, at ease. So in general, what we're seeing is that first person who got that higher score has a very, very strong impact in terms of how they make you feel from a positive perspective. Let's go dark for a moment. How did the difficult boss make you feel? Again, please share a few words with me in the chat box of what that was like. Frustrated, self-conscious, micromanaged, frustrated, again, angry, stressed. Anybody else? Okay, well, I'm waiting to go. Worthless. Good Lord, I'm sorry to hear that. Worthless. Isn't it a terrible indictment that self-doubt, worthless, unappreciated, and a terrible indictment that we could, and sometimes unwittingly, actually make somebody feel self-doubting or worthless, or even at the what's probably the softer end of this scale, unappreciated, frustrated. But to be able to make somebody feel angry, stressed, frustrated, self-conscious, micromanaged, etc., I think you're getting the picture. Here is the message that I need to get across with this. First, the way you show up, the way you behave, which is a choice, has a dramatic impact upon the way other people feel. We all, I believe in my heart, want to make others feel good. Some people turn up in a way that makes others feel bad. I don't believe the majority of people set out with that intent, but they don't realize that it's the behavior that they bring to bear, the way they show up, that has that impact. The good news is that can be observed, it can be measured, it can be given a score, and if it can be observed and measured and given a score, well then somebody who is not happy about the impact they're having on somebody can be given information that allows them to make the choice. Do I want to change my behavior? And that's really what we're here to talk about today, is that we all have the ability to change our behavior, become more emotionally intelligent, impact people in a more engaging and positive way, and leave people feeling altogether more positive. And that has a phenomenal impact upon the extent to which people engage with you and engage with their job. So if you're a person who's responsible for getting other people to engage with the organization yourself, how emotionally intelligent you are seen to be, you are measured to be, you demonstrate yourself to be, is really important. Final question on this. These people that you've been looking at, let's look at the positive person first. Are they, how far in your past are they? Are they in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 15 years, 20 years? Just pop that number up there. Is it 5 years or less that since you've worked with that person, 10 years or less, 15 years or less? What is it? How long is it since you worked with this person? Just give me some words, some numbers there, please. Anybody? Okay, I'm not getting any numbers. Let me just double check just to be sure. Am I still connected, folks? Can anybody just switch on their mic just to make sure that we haven't been disconnected?
Hi, Deiric.
Yes,
we
super.
can hear you. Yeah, we
Perfect.
can hear you. There's no problem. But also we can see numbers. Are you not getting the numbers that people are putting up right now?
Oh, Deiric. Oh, Deiric. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. The technology has, what can I say? I dropped the ball. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so I wasn't in the right place. Oh, good Lord. Okay, so 9 years, 5 years, current, 5 years, 10 years. Now, notice with those that some of them there were 9 years, 10 years. I was in an event last week in Turkey, and somebody mentioned that it was 25 years since they'd worked with this person. And the impact that that person had on them still resonated. They still remembered the impact that they had, and they still remember that person fondly. I dare say that's what most of us would like to think is the impact we have upon people. And I think it's really important to note that the impact, the way we make people feel, and it's outside the scope of this session today, is actually encoded into a part of the brain called the basal ganglia that remembers every positive or negative experience we ever had. It is a physically created memory. It lasts a long time. What about our negative role model? And let me make sure that I have the technology working correctly here. How many numbers, or how many years I should say, since the less appreciative boss? Okay, 22 years, okay? 22, 9, 13. Okay, again, notice that you have a negative impact upon people. You make them feel bad. 8, thank you, Chantal. You make them feel bad. It lasts a long time. It has a phenomenal impact. But it's never too late to reverse it, because the majority of people are so generally positively oriented that changing your behavior can turn that around. So, what have we seen? We've seen that you've already measured the emotional intelligence of two people. What I did, frankly, was I went to the Genos model that I told you about earlier on that we researched, and I told you there were 6 scales on it, and I took one item from each of those scales, and you used those to rate your good boss and your bad boss from your memory. The 6 scales are self-awareness, awareness of the extent to which you are aware of your emotions and the impact they have on your behavior and the things that you say. And at the high end, we would call somebody high on that present because they're very aware and present of what's going on, and disconnected if they're low on that state. So the item that we used there, which you used for rating your two people, was demonstrates awareness of their mood and emotions. The second scale that we used was awareness of others, the extent to which you are empathetic, the extent to which you appreciate how other people feel about situations and take that into account in your dealings with them. Now, sometimes empathy and awareness of others gets a bad press because people think that you can't be empathetic and appreciate where somebody's coming from and also disagree with them. It is entirely possible to appreciate where someone is coming from, to appreciate why they feel the way they do, why they feel so strongly, why they're so upset, and still to dramatically disagree with them. It is the best thing in the world you can be, is aware of what's going on with somebody else. High on that scale is empathetic, low on that scale is insensitive. And the item that we used for measuring that in our little small survey was makes others feel appreciated. The third scale that we looked at has the really powerful name of authenticity. And authenticity says, well, it does pretty much what it sounds like it does. It is the extent to which people see you as being genuine, the extent to which your word can be trusted, that what's going on in your head and the way you feel about things is what you actually share with them. High end is genuine, low end, and this is a terribly strong word, untrustworthy. If there is no trust, there probably is no real relationship, and there's certainly no real engagement. And the item we used from those items was just open and honest about mistakes. Now, let me make a point as I talk about these single items. In that scale, there are 7 items. So there are 6 other items in there that measure authenticity, because you won't always be measuring a binary situation like the one we've looked at just now, where you've got your best boss and the worst boss that you ever had. The majority of people are somewhere in between. So we have to have other items to be able to measure the shades of black and white, if you like, in there. So we have 6 other items on there, along with open and honest about mistakes, that measures authenticity. 6 other items on awareness of others. 6 other items in self-awareness. Emotional reasoning. Now, if you make your decisions solely and completely on the basis of pure, hard facts, you will never make the best possible. You are not capable of making the best possible decision every time. Because sometimes you have to take account of how am I being impacted by the emotions and the mood in this situation? How are other people being impacted? And what does that say about the decision I have to make? So the best decisions you will ever make will balance the cold, hard facts with how you and others feel about it. That's what we mean by emotional reasoning. The best decisions are made using the emotional content and the logical cognitive content. At the high end, people who use this information have a much more expansive range of options when it comes to making decisions. People at the low end have a much more limited repertoire of possible solutions to any situation. And, I beg your pardon, and the item that we use there, oh, I'm going the wrong way. Let me just go. Okay, can I reverse this back? 1 second, page down. Okay, it's going to refuse to let me go backwards. But so let's move on with self-management. In a tough situation, when tempers get frayed, when emotions get high, it can become very, very stressful. And stress is the disease of our age. For the first time ever, I'll give you an example, in the United States last year, for the first time ever, claims on employers for mental injuries exceeded claims on employers for physical injuries. People are now claiming against their employers for the damage that the stressful environment they work with is having or wreaking upon their mental health. We need to help people to understand how to manage their emotions effectively in difficult situations, how to be resilient. This scale on self-management is how do you cope when you're under pressure. Somebody who's high on that is resilient. Somebody that's low tends to be driven more by their emotions. And then finally, I asked you earlier on if you knew somebody who, when they walked in the room, tended to suck the energy out of the room and made it in general feel a little bit less unenergetic or a little bit less energetic and a little bit less positive. Well, on the other side of things, we all like to work with people who bring a positivity and energy and enthusiasm, if you like, a charisma to our working environment. And it doesn't matter whether that's the boss or just people that work with us. The last 25 years of positive psychology research tells us those people who turn up in a positive and engaging way inspire performance from us, particularly if they are our boss. So people who are high in that positivity, that ability to enthuse and engage people, empower us. People who are low, they leave us indifferent. And the one that we used there, specifically thinking of leaders, was the extent to which they recognized others' hard work and achievements. So you've already used this Genos model. You only used 6 out of 42 items in the model, and yet it showed you how to separate that person who had the behaviors that made you feel upbeat, positive, I was going to say worthful, but the opposite of worthless, engaged and so on and so forth, from the person who made you feel down, lacking confidence, unappreciated and stressed and so on and so forth. So you've already used the model. Imagine just how much more resolution you get when you use 42 instead of 6 items. This particular model comes in 2 different versions. So far, we've looked at the kind of leadership version. The main difference between the two, look at inspiring performance up at the top. The only thing we change when we go to a model that can measure people that are not leaders is that term. Everything else is just emotional intelligence. So we talk about positive influence. An individual in the workplace working as part of a team may have no responsibility for inspiring other people to greater performance, but they certainly can empower them through their positive influence, and they can make them indifferent, they can make them disconnect from the way that they choose to show up. One final thing about the model before I show you a little bit more about the system is notice the words that are around the outside there: present, empathetic, genuine. Several years ago, 2009, 2010, we had a major global meltdown, the global financial crisis, the global market crisis. And a lot of that came about because of absolutely unbridled greed. And the whip or the backlash against that has been a different, to move towards a different style of leadership. When you read the literature right now on what is considered to be those things that get the best results in the current climate, you'll hear words like present, empathetic, genuine, expansive, resilient, and empowering. These are the things we're trying to make our leaders and the people that work with us. Now, we've just done a very simple measurement, and we just separated your good boss from the other. Let's give that challenging or difficult boss the benefit of the doubt and say that he or she probably didn't want to have that negative impact upon you. And let's imagine that they went through our assessment. What happens next? Well, what we want to do next is give them some feedback and tell them, here's the way you're showing up, here's the impact you're having upon people, here's the way you're making them feel, and here are the things you can do to change if you want to. We have two different flavors, if you like, of the reports. One is workplace, and that's for everybody, including leaders. Anybody can complete a workplace report, and we do it in a 360 version, which is I assess myself, my boss assesses me, I'm assessed by my direct reports, by my peers, and by others, maybe clients. 180, I'm just assessed by one group, generally of colleagues or direct reports. And then the self-report, I'm just feeding back on myself. I'm just giving feedback without any feedback from outside. In general, we find the most effective reports are the 360 or the 180 because it's really about how are you impacting other people. For leaders, we have a specific set of reports that use very leadership-oriented language that speaks specifically to the requirements of leaders who are required, after all, to motivate people to achieve the best possible results. So again, we do a 360, a 180, or in a self, but the questionnaire and the terms that are used in the report are very, very leadership-oriented. Remember what I said at the beginning. Our company was founded specifically to provide tools to help people develop others, to develop people through actions that would help them get better results, measurable on the bottom line. It means that our reports have to have guidance on what you can do next. So they need to have a great look and feel and be usable, but they also have to be actionable. And that's the way our reports are put together. Don't worry, I'm not going to walk you through the reports page by page, but I do want to show you just how much accessible information there is in there. One of the things that people say to us all the time is that the reports are very, very attractive, easy to understand, but that there's a great depth of information. And I want to give you an example of just one part of one page, if I may. This is on the self-management scale. When we measure somebody, we put them, as I said to you, there are 7 items in each of the scales. On self-management, you can see those 7 items down the bottom. And we ask them and the direct reports and their peers to feed back on them and give a score between 1 and 5, just like you did. So, but before we get the level of demonstration, I think this is really clever, we ask them, for example, when you think of Deiric and the extent to which he manages his emotions effectively in difficult situations, tell me, how important is that to you? 1, it's not important at all. 2, it's slightly important. 3, fairly important. 4, important. And 5, highly important. And this is really key because some organizations require different sorts of demonstrations of emotional intelligence than others. What you're asking here is you're saying to every person who feeds back on you, tell me what you would like to see me deliver. Tell me how you'd like me to show up. Tell me what's your standard for this behavior. And so everybody who rates you on every one of these items rates first the level of importance that they see on that item. Then they measure the level of demonstration. That's what you did with your good manager and your challenging manager. You measured the extent to which they demonstrated these behaviors on a scale that ran from 1, significantly less than others, through less than others, average or typical, more than others, up to significantly more than others. So at a scale level, you can see there that, let's imagine this is my report. The people who fed back on this, maybe it's my direct reports, overall across the entire scale, they gave me a score of 4.8. You can see it up there on the, can I point? I'm not sure if you're seeing my pointer there. Oh yeah, here we go. Let me get a pointer, and I think I can point it there. No, I can't. No, I can't. Okay, the pointer won't work for me. Don't worry. But you can see that overall on that scale for the 7 items, I got an average of 4.8, and I got an average level of demonstration of 3.6. So there's a difference between what people expected and what people are seeing. And so that you can get close and see what exactly am I doing that they don't like, we also measure that on an item by item level. So notice, manages his emotions effectively in difficult situations. Got a 4.8 for that item for the importance. 3.8 was the demonstrated. And then D, we calculate the difference. We want everybody, when they read a report, to be able to intuitively know how important the information they're looking at is. So we use a traffic light or a traffic signal analogy here when it comes to the differences. If there's a difference that is within an acceptable margin, I won't go into why it's 0.5, but 0.5 and below, we consider those to be aligned. In other words, what people would like to see, their level of importance on that behavior is close enough to the level of demonstration that you can consider it aligned. Green lights mean whatever you're doing, keep doing it, you're meeting people's expectations. The yellow light that you're seeing here, which is 0.5 and up as far as a 1, means that there's a bit of a difference between what they're expecting and what they're seeing. And you really should look at this unless there are other items in there where there's a bigger gap, in which case you get that red light. So as you look at a page, your eye is going to be always drawn to the red anyway, and that's as it should be. Because in general, when we sit down to coach you through the report, when your coach, your consultant, or your trainer walks you through this, we want them to be able to cut through the noise and go straight to those items that are having the biggest negative impact upon the people around you. So the approach is, first you're going to be focused on the red, then you're going to be focused on the yellow, then you're going to be focused on the green. And in general, the green is whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So this is really important. It means that you have essentially an internal standard that the people who work with you internally are setting, and they're comparing you to what they'd like to see. That's powerful. But what's also powerful is this box here. This box is the average range of scores of all of the people who completed this assessment in our studies. So the extent to which you score into that box is the extent to which your score is consistent with the average population of people who have completed this assessment. So what you're looking for ideally is that your score should be inside or above that box. Below it is below typical, into it is about typical or average, above it is higher than average. So it gives you a second dimension. One is, how do I compare to the internal requirement of people? And secondly is, how do I compare to people in the outside world, to the average population out there? And we do that also on an item-by-item basis. If you're inside that benchmark, we give you that side-to-side arrow. If you're below it, we give you the down arrow. And there is no, sorry, I beg your pardon. And on that particular example, I don't have an up arrow, but if you were above it, you would have an up arrow. So here's my point. The reports are designed to be very accessible, but to have a lot of information that is really, really accessible, very, very immediately intuitive, and focused upon getting to action. So in the reports and in the way that we train our certified partners, we train them that every time you walk through a report, you're helping people get insights that result in actions, because we want somebody, when they get to the end of one of our reports, to say, now here's what I'm going to do next to move the needle on the impact I'm having on people, to change for a positive way the impact I'm having on people. Because there is no point going through any sort of an assessment if the intention is not to make some improvement. To help you make that improvement, every single person who goes through one of these assessments also gets an individualized development tips workbook. This takes you step by step through all of the items in the assessment, so that when you decide which ones you want to focus upon and want to make changes in, it gives you guidance on the sorts of things you can do to do that. One of the things that is really obvious and really apparent, but let me connect it up with research, is that when you have that positive impact upon people that your strong boss had upon you, well then you tend to engage them. And a dozen years of research show that when you engage people, you get superior bottom line results. They give greater discretionary effort. What you're seeing on the screen here is a study that was done with IBM across several territories. looking at the connection between leaders EI and employee engagement. And each of those dots on the screen is an employee. And each of those employees completed an assessment on their manager that allowed them to feedback on two things. They allowed them to feedback first on how their manager showed up. So they gave ratings on the 42 items, the 42 emotionally intelligent items. But also, and this is unique to Genos, they answered questions that rated their engagement. So in the same sitting, in the same assessment, we collected an assessment, excuse me, of how engaged each of these people were and how emotionally intelligently their bosses were behaving. And we mapped them. On the y-axis, you can see that the dot says how engaged they were. So you got people at the high end and the green zone are people who are highly engaged. They're already giving the best effort they can. Not engaged, they could be encouraged with some changes to give a better level of effort. And actively disengaged, effectively their lost causes. They are unlikely to be, it's unlikely that much that you can do is going to turn them back on again. Notice across the bottom that we've taken the overall emotional intelligence of these leaders and we've just converted it down to a single number. And all I want you to bring your attention to is that once you get above the 75 percentile, once the emotional intelligence of those leaders got beyond the 3/4 mark, notice there are no actively disengaged people. There are very few not engaged people. And pretty much all of the people working for those leaders who have high emotional intelligence are engaged. There is a direct connection between the extent to which people engage with their jobs and produce superior results and the relationship they have with their boss. And you can move the needle on that connection by raising the emotional intelligence of those leaders. So one of the things that we do that is really important that nobody else does is in a single sitting we provide an assessment that provides an engagement survey, engaging the extent to which an employee is engaged with their leader and their feedback on how emotionally intelligent that leader is. We give back this engagement snapshot. I'm not going to go into the detail of it. Sufficient to say, in one place you get everything you need to know. How am I impacting my people? Am I turning them on or off? What do I need to do to change that? Emotional intelligence, I already mentioned, is important in a lot of areas. Let me give you the 4 areas where our clients and our partners tend to work with this most. It's not exclusive, but this is where most of the applications come up. First one is in increasing leaders' EI to increase employee engagement. Our studies actually show that more than 50% of the extent to which somebody engages comes down to how emotionally intelligent their leader is, and happily that can be developed. Second thing is we use emotional intelligence to get people communicating better, behaving better as a team so that they don't react badly to change programs. Now, change programs can be an acquisition, the company is being acquired by somebody, a takeover, let's say, even the introduction of a brand new computer system that changes the way everybody works is threatening to a lot of people. Creating an environment where people communicate in an emotionally intelligent way inoculates people against the negative impacts of that stress. Of course, people that communicate better together and more aware of other people's emotions and the way they impact their behavior and the things that they say also work together better in teams. And then finally, as you saw, one of the areas where emotional intelligence has an enormous impact is in the area of sales. Salespeople who have the ability to be aware of the way that their clients and their prospects are responding to the ideas they're presenting get better results from those. Those are by no means the 4 in an exclusive list of the areas where we tend to work, but those are 4 of the biggest areas where this is applied. So if in your organization you ever want to increase employee engagement or deal with change or improve team working or improve sales performance, well then there's something in here for you. The key differentiators for us, it's very, very quick to take. You've seen that already. We're focused upon how you turn up. You can change behavior so that you can do before and after studies. We live in a world where our clients tend to measure, for example, with leaders, a leader's emotional intelligence and a leader's engagement with their people at time 1, then to make an intervention like training or coaching or consulting, and then at time 2, 6 or 9 or 12 months later to measure again to see what results did we get. And it's critical, and this is one of the critical things with the Genos system, we provide very clear, active support for coaching, training, and for moving that needle, moving people from time 1 to time 2 in a positive way. Also, as I mentioned, we are the only people who provide a single sitting engagement and employee emotional intelligence assessment in a single setting. Let me tell you a little bit about the organization and the respect it has in the community. The Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence was founded by Daniel Goleman because the emotional intelligence assessment world is full of cowboys. And himself and a leading light in emotional intelligence created the Consortium for Emotional Intelligence in Organizations, and they invite organizations who have credible research, credible tools, credible assessments and solutions to join. We are one of the charter members in that organization. Our founder is one of a personal member, and we're one of only 6 organizations whose tools have been given the blessing by the Consortium for Research in Emotional Intelligence. We've also been given the blessing as a business partner of the ICF, the International Coaching Federation worldwide. Now, I don't just mean that when you complete our training programs that you get ICF continuing education credits. I mean that they have tested our tools, evaluated them, and made us formally a business partner. They've given us a formal validation, if you like, that says this is a product in which we're well pleased. So here's how we work with our clients and our partners. Partners for us are coaches, consultants, or trainers who work either inside an organization or are independent working for other clients. We start by bringing you in for an intensive 2-day certification program. Very, very interactive, very, very upbeat, and it looks at how do you practically go about designing emotional intelligence programs to meet a client's need and develop those around the Genos assessments and training solutions. So we train you on how to work with the reports, how to coach through the reports, how to train with the reports, how to deliver them back, how to integrate them with other existing training and solutions. And if you're an independent consultant, trainer, and coach, we also train you how to present these and sell them to your clients effectively so that you understand how to position them into what you already offer. In that 2 days, we do a lot of interactive work. It's not, with the exception of the first couple of hours where there's a certain amount of the certifier doing some of the theoretical coverage, the program tends to be very hands-on, so that you walk out having worked with the reports and worked with the system in some depth. Anybody who completes it, who's an ICF coach, can get 10 core competency hours and 4 resource development hours towards their qualification. When you complete the certification, we give you a box of materials which are really, really powerful. The first one is a program called the Introduction to Emotional Intelligence. It can be structured as a 30, 60, or 90-minute sample session, a briefing if you like. It can be used as a keynote, it can be used as a brief training program, and it goes through how emotional intelligence works, a little bit about the neuroscience, and even talks through how our reports work doing that emotional intelligence experience exercise. We provide you with the slide deck. We provide you with the presenter's notes, the participant booklets, all in editable forms so that you can brand them up with your content. We also, one of the things that sets what we do apart from a lot of people out there is we have very high design values in what we do. The science is extremely strong, but the look and feel is equally strong. One other thing that we do on day 1, when you walk out of the certification program, we also give you a 1-day program, start to finish. So a complete program called Applied Emotional Intelligence that you can immediately start to deliver to your clients, is internal or external. Again, we give you the slide deck, we give you the facilitator's guide and script. We give you participant workbooks. We give you all of the exercise materials. And if you're an independent coach, consultant, or trainer, we'll even give you a promotional brochure that you can use for presenting it to your clients. All of this material is completely editable so that you can white label it. You can put your details onto it. This is, it means that when you walk out of the program that you have already got an immediate one-day offering. You understand the the Genos emotional intelligence assessments, and you also have a one-day program that you can deliver based upon those. But more than that, we're just on the edge. By the time I'm in South Africa next week, we'll have launched a thing called Genos University. Genos University is a 24/7 online support system designed for certified partners to give them the sort of support that they need when they finished the certification program. So we train you and we give you all of the information you need to understand about our reports, about how to sell and market them, about how to you work with our system and so on. But this online system allows you to go back at any stage and to watch video training programs, e-learning programs on how to work with those various different parts. And there are lots of different courses in there. This is an example of the one that you would probably go to day after your certification. It means that if you ever need a refresher when you're working with our material after you've finished the formal certification program, that you have access to this system. The system goes beyond just using Genos systems and services. It also, as I say, talks about selling and marketing emotional intelligence assessments offerings. And we're offering that in the future. We'll be offering that on a subscription basis to people who are not certified. But as a certified partner, you get lifetime access to this continually growing set of materials, which will be online 24/7. So that's something that's, again, no other vendor provides. You've got these video trainings that allow you to bring your skills and keep your skills updated on an ongoing basis. So where it all begins, where people start working with us, is in our certification program. And we have 2 certification programs coming up in Johannesburg very shortly. One of them just next week, and one of them in June. And the certification cost is 12,000 Rand. The 12,000 Rand covers the 2-day certification, the snacks and meals on that day, a very sizable collection of materials that we give you so that you're really ready to work with the Genos offerings after the program, the 1-day training program, the Introduction to Emotional Intelligence program, and access to Genos University. So that investment includes a hell of a lot more than just a couple of days training. As a Genos certified partner, you have access to all of the tools we have right now, any tools we produce in the future, and online training for any tools that we produce in the future at no cost. So I'm flying out of here. I'm in Dublin right now in Ireland. I'm flying out of here on Saturday next. I arrive on Sunday, and on April 10 and 11 I'll start the first program with Mark and the team. And I'm going to ask Mark to come back on, and he may have some comments about this. And then I'm happy to take any questions. Either we can, and probably the best way to do it perhaps is to pop those questions up on the chat line, because if we open all of the microphones at the one time, you know what happens, it goes crazy. But if you have a question, if you pop it up onto the screen, we can answer it there. And if we need to, we can open up your mic and you can talk to us. But meantime, let me call Mark in and just ask him, is there anything you want to add to that? Have I forgotten anything, Mark? And I'll put up the questions page, but I'll just let you come in and polish things off.
All right, Deiric, thank you so much. I'm just going to share my webcam quickly and give update. First of all, I'd like to thank Deiric for his time once again and the enthusiasm which he used to present the Genos International program or certification. Now, I do have a couple of questions which have already come through, Deiric. So I'm going to share that with you. This came from mostly Nita. Nita sent some questions through to me, and I'm just going to read that through to you, and maybe you can answer one or two of them, and I'll answer one or two of them. The first question from Nita was, if you look at any thoughts about integrity, stroke honesty connected to this emotional intelligence tool. And then the second question is, will the assessment be accredited with the Health Professions Council of South Africa for SA youth? And maybe I can answer that question first, and then Deiric, once I've done that, you can go back to the integrity one.
Integrity.
If you look at the Health Professions Council of South Africa, we've got some good news and we've got some bad news. The good news is that it's already registered, but it's registered as an assessment under how do they call it? Assessment under development. All right, and the reason being is that the original application has been made, and they have got to get back to us with regard to what we need to do next. So we're trying to find out what we need to do next in order to get it fully accredited. But the process has started, and for those that know, and this is one of my pet hates, the last time we did that, it took us 3 years to get the assessment through. We hope that it takes shorter than that this time. The next question which Nita gave to me was the cost per assessment. So I'm going to give you South African selling price, end user price. For the self, it sells at 900 Rand per person. For the 180 degrees, whether it be a general or a leadership one, it sells for 1,500, and the 360 sells for 1,900 Rand. So it's reasonably priced. And Deiric, I'm going to go back to you with regard to that honesty, integrity one. Do you want to share some thoughts with regard to that?
Yes, indeed, I do. While you were talking there, I was just trying to get something up on the screen, and I am just about there. So let me just make it a little bit larger, and then I'm going to reshare my screen, because I'm assuming you're not seeing me doing all of my searching here. Okay, let me just get this ready, and I'm going to share my screen again. Share screen. And you might just do me a favor and confirm that you're seeing that, Mark.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Well, I certainly am. I'm assuming everyone else does.
Everybody seen authenticity? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, super. Thanks, Nita. Yes, there is a bit in there about integrity, and we have, as you know, two slightly different versions of the assessment. One of them is the leadership version, and one is the workplace version. And the one we're looking at, just to give you an example, is the leadership version. And in authenticity, we measure the extent to which what you say is what you really mean and what you really think. It is integrity. It is what you say, what you see is what you get. It is tempered slightly in the sense that we say we want people to be absolutely honest without being absolutely totally blunt. So you'll notice, for example, we talk about people being open about their thoughts, feelings, and opinions, that they express their thoughts and feelings in a way that is sensitive to those of others. So we want them to be blunt and we want them to be open, but we don't want them to be too brutal about it either. And is open and honest about mistakes, honors commitments and keeps promises, encourages others to put forward their thoughts. So that's the connectivity that I see with integrity. And particularly in the leadership side of things, Nita, the lack of a fairly robust score on this scale is always a predictor of a poor relationship between a leader and the people who are working with them. Because as you know, if there's no integrity, if there's no authenticity, if there's no trust, it probably doesn't matter much what else is there. People just do not engage. So we measure it. I don't have on this machine right now the other variants that I could show you, but it's slightly different items. But that's how we deal with that. Absolutely, it's really important that you are straight about the way you think. Thank you.
Okay, Nita said thanks, and then she said our South African challenges are quite extreme. I think in some ways they're quite extreme, and I also think that in many ways they're quite unique with regard to some of the things that we've got to or that we're exposed to. One of the things that Deiric hasn't shown you on the report is that when people answer it, they also have to give a description, or not a description, but a rating of how familiar they are with the individual or the candidate that they are rating, as well as if we're looking at any group, such as a peer group, it would be the consistency of the responses. And I can see Deiric is moving up there. And Deiric, do you want to get that slide?
I'm just going to find that for you right now. Give me a second and I'll get that. Lordy, lordy. Okay, so here we go. So we measure, and let me see if I can just find that on the front. Here we go.
There we go.
Sorry, Anita, I'm sorry if everybody's getting dizzy out there following my screen booming up and down there. As Mark says, we look at, with everybody that feeds back, we say, to what extent are you familiar with Nita and her day-to-day behavior, and how qualified are you, do you feel, to be able to feed back upon her? And that familiarity runs from 5 or 100, let's say, down to 0. And we look to rate that, and in a perfect report, it runs somewhere between a minimum of 0.25 up to the top. You can see with this particular one, this was just the managers, and there was a familiarity of something like 95%. So this person says, hey, I know this person really, really well. I'm very familiar with them. Another thing that we ask, in fact, let me go to a different. Close your eyes if that made you seasick last time. I want to get a different group so that you can see that consistency score. There we go. Here we go. So here on the peers, you've got the familiarity. There were 2 peers. They had a very high familiarity with this gentleman. And then we asked for the consistency. We examined the consistency of the responses. We examined the extent to which people were saying the same thing. In other words, that they're seeing the same Deiric in the report. And that comes down a lot to the relationships that we have with different people in the group. In this situation, you can see quite an extraordinarily high level of consistency. It's almost, probably on your screen, it probably looks like it's 100%, but it looks to me like it's kind of 99% or some such, which is fairly unusual. There's usually some level of inconsistency. But what we're looking for is that it is at least at the average, which is 25 and up. There's just one other in there. Okay, I don't have another example in this. But we're looking for 25 and up on the consistency. And those are 2 validity checks that tell you, 1, are we dealing with people that can feed back? And 2, are they seeing the same person? If they're not seeing the same person, there's low consistency. That's one of the things that we train in the certification program. We train how to coach back a report where the feedback is inconsistent. And there's a very deliberate and very well thought out strategy for dealing with that. So thank you for bringing that up, Mark.
All right, no problem. Nita, that I think hopefully answers your questions. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask at this stage? I mean, you don't have to have questions, but if you do have any, Deiric, it doesn't look like anyone is giving anything else. Okay. So from my side, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. We're looking forward to having you in South Africa, where you can experience some of the heat and enjoy some of the African connection.
Yes,
right,
and I'm looking forward certainly to the heat, Mark. And I was watching a program last week about South Africa, and I took a note of a particular dish that looked for all the world. Oh my God, what did it have in it? It had egg. It doesn't matter. I've written it down anyway. It's a traditional South African, so I'm looking forward to trying it. It was almost like a porridge with egg, scrambled egg mixed through it. But I'll get the name.
Okay. We'll make sure you have a little bit of everything.
Super.
All right. Thanks a lot. And everyone, all those that joined the webinar, thank you. Really appreciate that. And we'll touch base with you individually as time goes by over the next day or so. Thank you. And Deiric, take care.
Thank you. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
All right. Cheers.